Well, good morning and welcome. I feel like next week I should handle like glow sticks or something like that. It just felt like a very upbeat thing. My name is Raja. I am the teaching pastor here at Uptown Community Church. For those of you may be new, we're going to start a brand new series this week, and this is a series that has been kind of bubbling within me. Yes, I have been gassy with this series. The thing that I've been with this series, I had a conversation with somebody about a week and a half ago, and they asked me, "How does God speak to you?" And it's actually kind of an interesting question, and that's a whole different series. But one of the ways God speaks to me is by repetition. And I think he speaks to me by repetition because I'm not that bright. I just need to be reminded constantly about things. So the Holy Spirit will bring to my mind, like it'll point out, oh, by the way, you've had this conversation now, or you've noticed something, or you've brought something to your attention this many times. It's like, okay, so maybe I should reflect upon it. So this idea about transformation, this idea about change, has been a conversation I've been having now for about 2 to 3 months with various individuals. And fun fact, I kid you not. So I'm sitting down to write this series. I'm starting to kind of research it, think about it. 4 times this week, people have come to me out of the blue and said, hey, I need to do this. I need to change this. How should I do it? I'm like, okay, let's have this conversation. And you would think that because I'm a pastor, it was spiritual. It was not. 2 of the 4 people were all about, how do I make physical changes? Like, okay, let's talk about this, right? One guy, actually, one of my managers came to me and said, hey, I have high cholesterol and my blood pressure's through the roof. What should I do? I'm like, I don't know, go see a doctor. What are you asking me for, right? But then we had a different conversation. So one of the things we're going to be talking about with this series is how do we change, right? How do we change? This, by the way, is a $1 trillion industry. Because if you think about it, everywhere you go, every person you think about is trying to change you in some way. Everybody has an idea of the world, and they're trying to say, this is how you should live your life out. Now, the reality is, inherently in all of us, we know we need to change. Right? We do. Right? Like, think about it in any aspect of your life. Are you productive enough? Are you healthy enough? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough nutrition? Are you praying enough? Are you focusing on God enough? Like, all these things come together, and it creates this bit of angst. I like to use the word tension, because we know we need to change. But the problem is, how do we change? I came across this great article. It's by a woman named Kathy Caprino, and she is like a change expert. I don't know what that is. I like to be called a change expert, but be more like an oil change. I don't think I know anything else. But she came up with this article and says this: the top 5 reasons people don't make the changes they long for. And this is what she says. Just this week, okay, thank you. Just this week, I worked with a client who, despite her efforts to build a new career path, hasn't been able to achieve or even move one step towards her ultimate goals. We analyzed what's in the way and why the process of change towards what she's dreamed of for herself just hasn't gotten off the ground. And this is kind of important, right? So if I say to you, what's your career aspirations, what's your education aspirations, all these things, we go, okay, here's the end goal. But then the next question is, well, how do I get there? She goes on to say this: our conversation got me thinking about this. Why do so many thousands of people, I would say millions, if not billions of people, fail to move forward effectively towards their dreams and goals, even when they have a deep desire to? So, oftentimes Christians will say, we know that Christ-likeness, or whatever terminology you want to use, that's the goal. But how do you get there? How do you actually end up there? What is the process? What does it look like to kind of become something you're not? She goes on to say this. I remember years ago when I was, sorry, is it not, am I fighting against you here, or? It's glitching. Okay. That's okay. You can just, we're already ahead of it there. So. Okay. It's okay. We'll catch up here. I'll read on. Marika will catch up with me, and it'll all be good. I remember years ago when I was speaking to a coach in the Tony Robbins organization, and he said, I don't really care what my client wants. I care what they're committed to. Let me just pause there for a second. This is actually kind of important, because oftentimes the change we want is more of a cognitive / this is my ideal. But this is what I like. This is what I am. This is what I'm committed to. And this is actually a really important distinction. The statement resonates with me, and I wholeheartedly agree, because it's what we're committed to. Those goals and visions we'll defend to the death and put our precious life's energy and focus towards. That gets done, not the millions of other wants and desires that roll through our minds every day. So I taught about this before, and we're going to actually come back to this. I always say to you that there's three engines within you, right? Things you have to do, things you want to do, and things you need to do. I say to the things that you have to do, that's the extrinsic motivation in your life. The things you want to do, these are the desires, right? So the things you have to do, extrinsic. You have to write an essay, you'll get graded for it. If you don't, you fail. You have to go to work. You don't show up, you get fired, right? These are extrinsic motivations, and we all have them. The things you want to do, your day off, what are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do? Right? But there's a third category, and this is the category most people don't think about, are things that you need to do. There are pieces of your life that even though you may not have an extrinsic motivation for it, even though you may not have an intrinsic motivation for it, there has to be a third motivational lever to kind of move us towards that. And she goes this, yet I have observed that even having a deep commitment isn't nearly enough to bring our goals into physical reality. So much more is going on behind the scenes in how we think, operate, feel, and respond to our world that will either help us generate change and movement or thwart us at every turn. And I think that's really true, right? So every Christian says to me, I want to change, but I'm not changing. I struggle with this. How do I not struggle with that? This is what I'm trying to become. This is what I want to become, but I'm not becoming. And without saying it, if we go along this path too long, a couple of things happen. One, we begin to question God. Well, doesn't God want me to be a better person? Doesn't God want me to be? Where's his help in this? Or two, we kind of internalize, well, maybe I'm a horrible human being. I'm a horrible Christian. I'm so sinful, right? Both of those are lies, but these are both things we have to wrestle with. So she goes on here. Hopefully this will work. I think my clicker's dead, so you're gonna have to go with me here. She gives 5 reasons. First one, they don't know how to sustain motivation. This is actually really, really important, right? Sustaining change is how we change, but the problem is most people won't sustain change. So January 1st comes along. My New Year's resolution is to get healthy and go to the gym. That's great for the first 3 weeks. Anybody goes to the gym on a regular basis, the first 3 weeks of the year is like hell week. Because you got people who are going to the gym who've never been there, even though they've been paying for it for years, and they're looking at these these machines as torture devices, and you see them doing kind of weird things like, hey, that's not what it's meant for, and I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to have that in your mouth, and can you please just don't put just right? But after 3 weeks, and by the way, there's a reason why it's 3 weeks, they kind of stop. The change isn't sustained. Now, think about this, for example. How many times have you been in this crisis moment of your life where you've been so desperate for God and you want to, okay, Lord, I'm so sick of struggling with this. I'm so sick of wrestling with this. I now commit to you that I will never do this again, or I will never look at that again, or I will never be this again. And you're like, yes, okay. We have this emotional response, and then we're back right into it again. So she says here that they don't know how to sustain movement. That's a motivation. That's really important. Number 2, they have the desire but not the tools, mindset, energy, know-how, support to create change. This is actually really important as well, too. Change takes tools, and I'm going to show you what some of those tools are as an introduction today. But so it's funny. I have a tendency to bite off more than I can chew. I don't know if you're like me or not, but I tend to have these ideas in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, I could do this. And then what actually happens, I'm like, oh man, what did I commit myself to? So when I began to sit down and write this series, I thought, oh yeah, I could talk about this. But then as I started having these other conversations, like, oh man, I have bitten off way more than I could chew with this series. Well, I can chew this series. This is going to just take a little bit of time. But the reality is, I have to give you the tools for change. And one of the tools we're going to look at in a second, is really, really important, but we're going to have to talk about how this actually gets played out in your life. Number 3, what they thought they wanted, I don't know why she put it that way, isn't turning out to be right, but they don't pivot. So let's just say what they thought they wanted isn't turning out to be right, but they don't pivot. Now, pivot's actually kind of important. Pivot has become this new business term, and the term is this idea, you're heading this way, you realize it's wrong, you pivot, and you go this direction. It's fantastic. But here's the problem. Are you pivoting too early? Are you pivoting too late? It's kind of the conundrum, right? It's like, do we actually do it or do we not do it? Number 4, their confidence has been flattened and they don't know how to rebuild it. This is actually kind of interesting as well, too. As a Christ follower, you say to yourself, this is what I want to do. This is the discipline I want to master. This is the habit I'm trying to undo. But what happens is that we don't really believe that we can. We don't really believe that God can help us. Therefore, we kind of subtly, not so subtly, kind of just forget about it and kind of go about our way. And number 5, new life challenges bubble up to shift priorities. So it's interesting, like you may say, okay, this is what I'm trying to do, and then all of a sudden you get a new job, you lose a job, you have a relationship, you lose a relationship, like whatever, right? All these things in our lives can shift our priorities, and so all these things can put like speed bumps on the road for us to change, and we don't know what to do with it. And I think that's really kind of important. But let me say this statement here. Next one. At the heart of Christianity is transformation. And this is the thing we cannot escape. Whatever Christianity is, whatever to be a Christ follower means, transformation, change is at the very, very core of it. Every scripture you look at, every story you look at in the Bible has either the success or the failure of it. So we just went through the book of Judges, right? And we've been looking at the book of Judges now for several weeks. And in that book of Judges, we see the cycle of sin. And we see how people either overcome, but the book of Judges tells us, or succumb to the sin and or what's going on around them. And so if at the heart of Christianity is change or transformation, why is it not happening? Next one. David Kinnaman wrote a book, and he says this in the book. Most people in America, when they are exposed to the Christian faith, are not being transformed. They take one step into the door, and the journey ends. They are not being allowed, encouraged, or equipped to love or to think like Christ. Yet in many ways, a focus on spiritual formation fits what a new generation is really seeking. Transformation is a process, a journey, not a one-time decision. This is really kind of important, actually, because what happens is people declare themselves, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christ follower, but they look exactly the same as everybody else. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean we have to kind of get like a cool tattoo of like Greek or Hebrew on our arm to kind of distinguish ourselves? Is it that we wear suits to church? Is it like, what is it that actually physically distinguishes us? And that's missing the point. Because physically, there should be nothing that should be different about us. But internally, our values and how we look at things, that should be really different. And it should be so different, especially with our culture today, that people should take notice. People should kind of going, I don't get it. Why? Right? Why? But the problem is Christianity, Western Christianity especially, has become into a unhealthy assimilation with culture. We don't want to seem different. We want to seem like everybody else. Right? Our churches are cool, our pastors are cool, our worship is cool, our buildings are cool, and look, we're cool. Come to church because we're cool. And it's like, that's not really what people are looking for, because the profoundness or the profundity of our faith really is lessened when we try to make it look or feel like everybody else. Next one. Let me just pause here for a second, and as I was writing this, something kind of, triggered within me. There's two distinctions we're going to make here. We have to pause here to clarify between feeling transformed and being transformed. Somebody literally said to me 3 weeks ago, I don't feel like I've actually changed. And I'm like, ooh, this is really good, right? Like, so what's the difference between feeling transformed or being transformed? And this is actually kind of important because our emotions, our heart, the Bible tells us, is deceitful above all things. So if I said to you, do you feel transformed? I would say most people go, well, no, actually I don't. I don't feel transformed. I don't feel changed. I don't feel like I've grown. And that's actually kind of valid. But I would say to you that feeling might be a wrong metric in regards to finding out whether we've actually changed or not. So next one. You remember this from our cycle of sin from the Book of Judges series? This here, believe it or not, was kind of an Easter egg I hid in the last series that I was actually working on for this series, but I realized it's applicable for the last series. Now here's the reason why. Next one there, Enrica. We've called this a cycle of sin, but I really like to think about this. When I first wrote this out, when I first kind of graphed this, it was actually the cycle of stagnation. When you stop moving in your faith, the book of James and the cycle of sin actually tells us for that, right? So we have the cycle of stagnation. You have to understand something. In the Bible, according to how God sees us, stagnation is death. Not being moved, not wanting to move, not growing is actually spiritual death. And this is actually kind of key here, because when we talk about this idea of growth, if I say to you that growth is movement towards, and you say to me, I've been stagnant, then I want to say to you that without realizing it, you are actually in a very precarious place spiritually. Because if you are not growing, then there's something wrong within you. You know, I don't know if I should say this, but boring Christians bug me. And here's what I mean by boring Christians. Boring Christians are people to me who are not taking any risks spiritually, who are not taking any risks in their lives. And here's what I mean by that, because for me, I don't know about you, but for me, Christianity is kind of horrifying a little bit in the sense that for some reason, God's always kicking me in the pants to kind of get out of this. I'm like, hey, you know what? You know, I've got a nice little rhythm going here, Lord. This is kind of cool. Okay, let's good. And God's like, yeah, really? It's like, okay, let's get you out of that because that's not going to help you. I planted Uptown Community Church because of that kick in the pants. Because I realized that the last church I was at, I didn't need God anymore. I didn't. Like things were rocking. We were killing it, and you know, I was a golden boy, well, mocha boy, whatever you want to call it, right? But I was killing it, right? But I realized, I came to this conclusion that if the Holy Spirit didn't show up to any of my services, if the Holy Spirit didn't do anything in that, I didn't need him. I didn't need him anymore. Because I had such momentum of methodology behind me, I didn't need God anymore. And I am wise enough to know that that's a horrifying, horrifying statement. So what I find kind of interesting about this is that when we talk about spiritual growth, it's not just a, hey, this is something you should think about. This is something that it should also be a warning sign that if you have not grown, and just to be clear here, we'll distinguish through the series between feeling and being, but if you actually aren't being transformed, you need to ask some difficult questions about your faith walk. Because you may actually be kidding yourselves in regards to that, and we'll get to that in a second. Next one. So the question we're going to ask, and the question we're going to look at throughout the series, is this idea of being transformed. Now, remember I said to you that for me, how I understand sin is like an addiction. Now, what I find about an addict is that when we are addicted to something, we cease movement, and we are only moving towards one thing, and that's being fulfilled by this addiction. Now, the reason I said to you that addiction for me was like sin was because people who are in the addict world, but are also kind of Christ followers, they see the parallel as well too. Janet Warren says this: addiction is a prevalent and complex problem. Likewise, sin is universal, but cannot be considered in a simplistic manner. I suggest that a psychological conceptions of addiction and theological conceptions of sin can inform one another. Although they are not identical, both addiction and sin are characterized by ambivalence, denial, self-absorption, and self-deceit. Pause. These words here is everything you need to know about spiritual stagnation. Spiritual stagnation starts with this idea of self-deceit, move towards self-absorption, comes to a denial, and ambivalence is, well, maybe I don't need to grow. Maybe I don't need to have the Holy Spirit speak in my life. Or maybe I don't need to, right? So when we talk about this idea of addiction, it's actually kind of interesting because when we think about applying these rules to how our spiritual growth becomes, there's actually kind of some interesting parallels. Both often develop as a means to avoid emotional and psychological distress, but easily spiral out of control. I was working at one job, and a gentleman I was talking to had been working in mental health for like 40 years, and he just retired. And we were just talking about the mental health crisis that our culture is going in right now. And he was talking to me, and he's like, interesting. He goes, and I told him a little bit about my background. So we're like, oh, okay. So we're I'm trying to set up his phone, but we had a whole different conversation. But he said something to me kind of interesting. I said to him that what I see when I see addiction is I see self-soothing behavior. And he's like, oh, yes, self-soothing behavior. I'm like, that's what it is. Addiction is a way of kind of mitigating or relieving ourselves of some sort of angst and or tension in our lives, we want to forget. We don't want to feel bad. We want to feel good. Therefore, we indulge. Well, just so you know, again, like that pathway leads us to this point where we are no longer growing in God. They involve volition, but choices may be constrained by experiencing. Considering the nuances of sin and addiction can be a compassionate Christian response. And I like the word compassionate because on the one hand, I think Christians have been too hard on themselves, but on the other hand, I think we might have been too easy on ourselves as well. I know, it's got to be in between there somewhere. We'll talk about that. Psychiatrist Gerald May, who incorporates Christian concepts, defines addiction as a state of compulsion, obsession, or preoccupation that enslaves a person's will and desire. Now, when we talk about this idea of transformation, will and desire are going to come into it time and time again, and we're going to have to distinguish what's the difference between will, what's the difference between desire. Next one. So the question we're going to ask throughout this entire series, the question I'm going to ask you to ask yourself, are you being transformed? One of the Sundays we're going to be together, we're actually going to do a worksheet together because I need to help you to see whether you're being transformed or not. We have to have an honest opinion of ourselves. When you're dealing with an addict, I know all of this addiction talk, the first thing the addict must admit to before the addict can change is this addiction is now overshadowing other parts of my life, and the pain is now not worth the pleasure anymore. When the addicts can admit that, the addict can change. But if the addict does not admit that, please hear me very clearly, nothing you can do will help them with their addiction. People call this rock bottom. People use different terminology to it, but it's just simply this. Unless an addict admits to their addiction, they will not seek help. Unless you admit to your lack of spiritual growth, you will not grow. Pretty simple, right? So let me give you some reasons why we don't grow. Next one. So the first one, we lose sight of God's wonder. Now, here's what I mean by this. If you can remember when you first became a Christ follower, or when you first seriously thought about who Jesus and who God was, there was this sense of awe in you, right? There was this sense of excitement of reading the Bible, of understanding things in the Bible. There was this joy that came along and coincided with your faith. Problem is if you've been a Christ follower for any period of time, you stop feeling that. You stop feeling excitement or joy or wonder with who God is. And then from there, we start talking about self-soothing behavior. We start talking about misdirecting everything. Next one. We become pretty good. Now, here's what I mean by that. The enemy of the great is the good, right? That's Jim Collins. That's not me. But again, I think he's right? The enemy of the great is the good. There are so many good, bland, vanilla Christians, but there's not very many spicy. I don't know why spicy is the opposite for vanilla to me. But there's not a lot of great Christians. And that's actually kind of interesting to me. You ever talk to somebody and something about their faith walk is like, ooh, I kind of like that. Right? I had this conversation with this person this week, and they were talking about their faith journey, and it was like, I really like what you're saying about your faith. There's some excitement in you that's resonating in my spirit, and that's reminding me that I should have that as well. So oftentimes what we do is when we kind of compare our Christianity to somebody else's Christianity, we look at peripherals, we look at habits, we look at maybe the externals, but what we don't think about is just the excitement. Like you can be a pretty good Christian, and by pretty good I mean you don't kill anybody, you go to church on Sunday, that's fine. But is that really what Christianity is about, is being just pretty good? Because I think Western Christianity, I think our churches are full of pretty good Christians. But that pretty good Christianity is not convincing anybody that this is true. It's bland, it's tasteless, and it's just like everybody else. So something is missing, some, I would say, spice is missing in our Christianity to kind of like people take notice. Next one. The other thing, too, is that I think many people think we've locked in heaven. And what I mean by that is that we've kind of reduced our Christianity down to this idea that, you know what? If I died right now, I'd go to heaven. So why bother being uncomfortable? Why bother trying something new? Why bother any of this other stuff? I'm locked in. I got my ticket. It's good. And again, I think this comes from a little bit of self-delusion or perhaps more self-deception in regards to, is heaven the only goal of Christianity? And I would say to you, it's not. There's something else that's supposed to take place. Next one. The world satiates us. Now, satiation is an interesting word because it's this idea that if you have a hunger, right, if you feel snacky, what do you snack on? Right? If you're bored, what do you use to occupy your time? So literally that manager that came to me and talked about his blood pressure and all that, we started talking about it, so I started breaking down his eating habits. I'm like, so, at night after you have dinner, what do? Well, I have a beer and I eat chips. Okay, here's the first problem, right? Let's talk about that, right? And again, so we started walking through it, right? But what was interesting about this conversation with him is when he was told he had high cholesterol, when he was told he had high blood pressure, it was a surprise to him. Not a surprise to me. I've seen him. Right? He's like, I don't know why you're shocked. It's not kind of rocket science. And then we started talking about his eating habits, and it's like, again, no shock here. Why are you surprised by this? The reason he's surprised by this is because, again, maybe it's self-deception, what it might be, whatever, but whatever it is, he has been satiated. He's found ways to satiate himself. And so what I'm trying to help him to do now is flip his that switch in him so that he can start trying different things and maybe cutting things out. Next one. And this is the one that I think that this kind of hits closest to home for many Christians. We focus on sin management. And what I mean by sin management is, okay, I haven't grown, but if I've sinned, I want to just really I want to negotiate with God. Right? I want to negotiate my spiritual life with God. So, yeah, I do this stuff. But on the other side, I do this good stuff too, right? Like kind of a karmic balance. I'm like, well, first of all, we're not Hindu, so I don't know where that came from, right? But isn't there kind of like this spiritual balance? So I have this stuff that I do that, maybe people don't know about. I look at this, or I do that, or I, whatever, engage in that, whatever. But I do all this good stuff. So isn't it really kind of a good enough? Like, the tips the scale here towards God liking me and locking in heaven. But again, if transformation is more than all these things, then there has to be a piece of it. So, remember I said to you that the series isn't going to be about, hey, you're a bad Christian, you need to grow. That's not what the series is about. But what it is about is this idea of there has to be something that we can actually apply to ourselves to say that we want to transform. And just so you know, I've come up with a formula. Next one. So, one of the things, so for you science people, you're loving this, right? It's so funny. I was at the Rave Hope, and I was talking to some of the staff, and I put this on the board on the if you've been to the Rave Hope, there's what meals are you serving? So I put this on the board. I was mapping it out, and I was talking to Brad, and I was talking to Johnny about this, and I put this on the board, and a few of the guests came over. They're like, what math problem is this? I'm like, it's the math problem of the soul. Ooh, okay. Metaphysical. Let's do this. All right. And some of the guests have some pretty interesting conversations. It was kind of cool, actually. But here's the thing. I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story of how I've came up with this. But this is my formula for how you need to change. Next one. Now let me unpack the terms. Space plus awareness divided by fear times testing equals transformation. Now, let me unpack this for you, because half this formula most of you know, but the other half of it you don't apply, and this is why you don't change. Okay? So I'm going to unpack each of these pieces, and I'm going to tell you why this isn't a abstraction, but this is actually how I live my life. And I'll explain to you why in a second here. So let's go first of all to this idea of space. It is the final frontier, but there's also kind of important things to it. Next. So one of the things you have to understand about this idea of space is that when we're thinking about transforming our lives, what we have to realize is that transformation dies in clutter. So, fun fact, if you go to see a professional transformation coach, life coach, blah, 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 whatever else it might be, if you're talking to somebody who actually knows what they're doing, the first thing they may say to you is, if you're looking for office productivity, the first thing they'll say to you is, let's redo your office. If it's lifestyle productivity, they may actually say, let's take a look and let's reorganize your home. Here's the reason why they do that. Is our physical space as a representation of our mental space. Okay, so they have picked up on something that's really important. The Bible talks about this all over the place, and again, as we kind of progress through this series, you'll see why, but the Bible talks about this as well. If transformation is progression, then what stands in our way is who we are or were. Pause. Who we are and who we were is in the present tense or past tense. Transformation always is existence in the future tense. So what you are, what you were, will always inhibit what you could become. I hope that makes sense. Because whatever you are going to become, if you use the past as prologue for the future, you're never going to get it quite right. And also, if you look at what you are right now, you have to realize that that's also not what God wants to do for you in the future. What I love about this is that I was actually going to use the parable of the sower as just kind of breaking this whole thing down, but I decided to go a different direction. But I'm still going to kind of steal a little bit from when Jesus taught on this with the parable of the sower. The seed that fell on the footpath represents those who hear the message about the kingdom and don't understand it. Then the evil one comes and snatches away the seed that was planted in their hearts. The reason why Jesus uses footpath is because a footpath is a place for people to move quickly. What happens in this idea of quickness or speed is we don't take time to reflect, to meditate, and again, as we get to the other elements of this transformation, we're not going to get to the transformation piece of it. So we have to actually come to a place of uncluttering. Did you know that the idea or the concept of wilderness in the Bible is mentioned over 300 times, and almost, I haven't done a formal study on this, so I don't want to make too much of a grandiose claim, but as I've just on the surface skimmed through this, almost every biblical character who God did something with is first led to a wilderness experience. Let me repeat that. Almost every person that God uses in some sort of capacity for the betterment of Israel or the betterment of his people are first led to the wilderness experience. Now, you can talk about Abraham, Moses, Israel, David, prophets, Jesus, Paul, John, etc. Right? Just that was just the ones I could think of at the top of my head. If I dig deeper into this, I'm sure I'm going to get everybody. I'm going to almost hit everybody. Now, what's important about the wilderness? There's nothing there. It's just open space. The clutter of our lives is dispensed with, and God is given space for him to move in our lives. So the first thing that has to happen for transformation is space. You won't become something if your life is full of something. Remember I said to you before, every yes to something is a no to something else. If I say to you, when we talk about this idea of transformation, a piece of it is spiritual disciplines. Oh, pastor, I think it's great people who pray and all these other stuff, but I don't have time. I just don't have time. I'm busy. I get it. Your life is cluttered. But these are good things, but not great things. And so we have to ask ourselves, how do we create space for God to move? Next one. The second thing that has to happen in regards to transformation is awareness. So once you've created space, the second thing you need to have is a awareness and or focus. A constant awareness or focus needs to guard the space we've created. In the beginning, this can seem tiring, but eventually it becomes a habit. Here's what I mean by that. In the beginning, when we are decluttering our lives, what happens is like it's very, very uncomfortable, right? It's very, very uncomfortable. But the issue becomes, though, and this is important, once you do something on a repetitive nature, it becomes habit. So, fun fact about me, and we're going to talk about this in a second, but my health actually took a dive about 2 years ago, and I had to kind of change who and what I was. But what happens, though, is that because of how I live my life, I work and I do other things, I have to get to the gym on a regular basis, or else it's not just a, hey, I want to fit into these jeans here. I don't really care about that. But it's, hey, if I don't do this, I'm going to die. So the problem is, though, is I got to be somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning. I have extrinsic motivation. So I've had to train myself to get up at 5:45 in the morning now. I know, you're like, nobody gets up at 5:45 in the morning. I do. If I don't, I'm not going to have space for this so that I can have this. So I've actually, in the beginning, trust me, I'm not a morning person. Although my wife goes pee like 5 times a night, so I could just be. I don't actually sleep anymore. I just nap until she wakes me up to go to the bathroom. I don't know, but I actually have had to create space, and I've actually created a habit now so that I'm able to kind of create space for something else. I have to guard that because I got to tell you, 5:45 comes, my alarm goes off, and I kind of hate it a little bit. I kind of want to throw my phone across the room. I kind of want to hit snooze. I kind of want to hit whatever. I've purposely put my phone away from me, so I actually have to get up to actually reach to it. That's a little trick there. But the thing is, though, is that if I don't guard the space that I've created, it will be cluttered with something else. In this particular case, sleep. And then again, go back to the parable of the sower. But since they don't have deep roots, they don't last long. They fall away as soon as they have problems or are persecuted for believing God's word. What I love about that is there are always going to be extrinsic things in your life that are going to attack the things that God wants. Remember, I've said this to you. The closer you draw to God, the more your life falls apart. You ever had a church service, a retreat, or something where you feel like, okay, I want to draw close to God. And then Monday morning, your life falls apart? And then you get distracted by so many other things. You're like, I thought God wanted me to draw closer, but apparently he doesn't because my life's falling apart. Just to be clear here, the enemy knows, unless you have that extra gear of kind of getting over this stuff, this way of kind of persecuting, this way of kind of making your life fall apart is the best way to distract you from what God wants for you. John chapter 14, verse 26. But when the Father sends the advocate as my representative, that is the Holy Spirit, he will teach you everything and remind you of everything I've told you. What I need the Holy Spirit to do for me is to remind me what I already know or I'm already trying to live. Because if you think about your day, how often throughout the day do you think about God? How often do you have an awareness of God's presence, of God moving in you, of actually speaking to you, of actually being active in your daily life? And that's actually kind of an interesting and or odd thing to think about, because for most of us, if I say to you at the end of the day, like someone said to me this morning, so how's your week been? And I'm like, I don't even know. What did I do this week? I can't even remember, right? If you ask me at the end of the day, so how's your day? I'm like, my wife says it all the time. How's your day? Good. That's it. That's all I got. I can't even remember what I did for the day, right? So if I say to myself, if throughout the day, did I actually take time out to think about God? Did I actually have space created for God? If I don't create that space, I'm going to tell you right now, it gets occupied with other stuff. Robert L. DeMoca says this: living with a conscious awareness of God's presence will keep us sensitive. An awareness of his closeness will remind us to guard our thoughts, words, and behavior. Oftentimes, the reason we can act, behave, think, do whatever we do throughout the day is because we've stopped thinking about God. Now, the question you need to ask yourself is, how do I do this? We'll get to that, but first we need to kind of display kind of where we want to go. Next one. Now, here's the one that people don't think about. So the space and awareness, most people go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I need to create space. Okay, God, I'll get up and I'll pray. But there's a piece of change that's actually kind of important that I've learned that I want to share with you, and that's fear. This seems counterintuitive, but actually might be the most important piece. Often change takes place from a crisis event, but once a crisis and or emotions disappears, we go back to the way we were. Fear must still echo in our being so that the temptation for regression is checked. Here's what I mean. If you do not fear stagnation, if you do not fear going back to your former way of life, you will go back to your former way of life. If you do not fear regression, if you do not fear stagnation, you will stagnate and you will regress yourself. I know this seems kind of a weird thing to think about because many times Christianity is portrayed as just love God. God loves you. He's okay. He's cool. And he's all this and all that. Yes, but one of the things I love about Paul, there is a tension in Paul's writing that I don't know if you picked up on, but whenever I read Paul's writing, part of me kind of sees that when Paul's writing to the church in Philippi, Galatia, Thessalonica, Corinth, part of Paul is remembering what he used to be like as well. And the reason why I think Paul reacts so horrifically towards some situations, because I think Paul struggled with it himself. Right? We're always most sensitive to something that we are wrestling with ourselves. And so I can see in Paul's writing, I can see in how and what he says, there is a fear. There's a fear to become a religious authority again. There's a fear of becoming, going through the motions of our faith. right? And this is why he uses phrase like old self, your former things. He talks like all about the past, but he doesn't talk in a way, yeah, it's fine. He talks about it, and the terminology he uses around it is actually kind of horrifying. It's kind of like, I don't want to become this. Fear, believe it or not, is actually an element of change that we don't think about enough. And if I said to you, do you fear the lack of spiritual growth in your life? Most people go, well, I don't fear it. I don't want it, but I don't fear it. If you don't fear it, if you are not afraid of becoming what you were again, you're not going to move forward. Philippians chapter 2, verse 12b to 13. Work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. For God is working in you, giving you the desire and power to do what he pleases him. Now, what I love about this is a couple of tensions Paul creates here, right? There's this deep reverence or wonder. Remember, we talked about that at the beginning here, but there's also a fear. And one of the things that's interesting about Western Christianity is when we use the phrase, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, we don't like that, right? We like loving God. We like gracious God, right? And a lot of people's theology has shifted towards, I don't look at the Bible this way. I look at it, God loves everybody. Yes, he does, right? He absolutely loves everybody. However, he also has boundaries he set out for us as well, too. He also has a way that we are supposed to live our lives. And he's not okay with the other stuff. Yes, he loves us, but that love isn't this kind of abstract, kind of gooey, kind of like, ooh, I just feel so loved. It's this love of like, hey, this behavior, this thought life, this thing that you do leads you to this. And if that doesn't make you afraid, then I don't know what will. So fear actually, believe it or not, as I've come to understand transformation, is actually a part of it. And this last one, and this is the part that most people don't think about, and the part we're going to spend a little bit of time on, is testing. How do you know if you've changed? How do you know if you are being transformed? And most people, the reason they don't know is because they're not keeping track. And you're like, wait, what? What kind of Christianity is this where I have to keep track of like whatever it might be, whatever it is spiritually I need to keep track of? Like, what is going on here? Like how am I supposed to love God if I have to keep track of stuff? But here's the problem. What I've learned about transformation, I've learned that unless I have something external to myself to actually keep track of it, I'm not going to actually change. I love what Peter says in 1 Peter. So be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little time. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. How do you know your faith is being shown? If I said to you, here's 10 people, pick out the Christian. I don't know, maybe the guy with a clerical collar. I don't know, the guy wearing a robe. That seems pretty Christian to me. And that could be true. But that you can't really see it that way, but there should be something about you. I remember when it was so funny. I was out at one of my jobs, and I was talking to somebody. They didn't tell me they were a Christian, but my spidey senses was tingling. It's like, you know what? I'm going to go on a limb here. And so, they asked me a little bit about myself. Yeah, I'm a pastor. Oh, I go to church. I'm like, of course you do. I could tell. I could tell how you're talking. I could tell by your demeanor. I could just tell. And again, I can't quantify that. Sorry, but I just knew that there's something different about this person. And of course, I just probed a little bit. Yeah, they're a Christ follower. I was like, yeah, okay, I get it now. And then our conversation shifted a little bit. It was kind of cool. But the thing is, though, is that there has to be an external testing. Now, let me show you something here. Next one. I can't stress to you enough how important testing is in order to change. And it's actually, there's a whole realm of psychology / empirical testing which is scientific. Now, I know you're saying to yourself, wait, this is church. Why are we bringing science into church? And, well, those of you part of UCC, this shouldn't be a surprise to you. But when we talk about this idea of transformation, there's actually a lot of information or data behind how people actually change. But the issue becomes that people don't actually want to change. So there's it's the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, right? Great name. It's called the Science of Improvement, and this is what they say. By planning it, trying it, observing the results, and acting on what is learned, this is the scientific method used for action-oriented learning. So the graph here is the model for improvement. At the top it says this. What are we trying to accomplish? So what's the end goal in mind? Second, how will we know the change is an improvement? So in other words, behaviors or things you're trying to do, is it going to help you get to that end goal or not? So how do you know if that's true or not? And finally, what change can we make that will result in an improvement? So if I said to you, what's the end goal of being a Christ follower? Everyone says, to be like Jesus. Who cares? Like really, who cares? Because what does that actually even play out to? If I say to you, be like Jesus, what does that even mean? I gotta grow a beard, walk around with a robe? That sounds like the Big Lebowski, really, right? Like that's not really being a Christ follower. Thank you, David, for getting that joke. Like that. What does it mean to be like Jesus? So there has to be something in this that actually points us towards this. So then this is next graph here, right? And I love how it starts off with hunches, theories, and ideas. I have an idea. I have a hunch. I have a thought. But basically, you take this, you roll it up the hill, and you begin to realize, okay, this is what's helping. This is what's not helping. What worked and what didn't work, what should be kept, changed, and or abandoned, and uses the new knowledge to plan the next test. So I said to you, how do you know you're being spiritually transformed? You have zero data to back up what you're about to say. And this can either lead to anxiety, tension, and or really self-delusion. How do you know you're being changed? You have to have something external to you for this. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my story. Next one. When I turned 50, I was given this great gift, and that's called type 2 diabetes. I was going to put the series together, and I was going to reference a whole bunch of people, but then I realized something. I actually kind of know a lot about this. So let me just tell you a little bit about what diabetes is. And I could get Donna up here because she's actually a diabetes educator, and she's actually been my coach in this, but she would do a much better job. But let me explain to you how I understand it. Insulin is a hormone that comes from the pancreas, a gland located behind and below the stomach. Insulin controls how the body uses sugar in the following way. Sugar in the bloodstream triggers the pancreas to release insulin. Insulin circulates in the bloodstream, enabling sugar to enter the cells. The amount of sugar in the bloodstream drops. In response to this drop, the pancreas releases less insulin. Who cares? I'm going to show you why you need to care in a second. In type 2 diabetes, this process doesn't work well. Instead of moving into the cells, sugar builds up in the blood. As blood sugar levels rise, the pancreas releases more insulin. Eventually, the cells in the pancreas that make insulin have become damaged and can't make enough insulin to meet the body's needs. So, fun fact. Well, maybe not fun fact, but horrifying. Untreated diabetes, heart attack, loss of vision, amputation if you really want to go to the extreme. But there's a lot of reasons why this is kind of important. Next one. And just so you know, this is actually kind of a global problem. 537 million adults between the ages of 20 and 79 are living with diabetes, which basically works out to 1 in 10. This number is predicted to rise to 643 million by 2030 and 783 million by 2045. Over 3 in 4 adults with diabetes live in low and middle income countries. Pause here. If sugar is a problem, most people living in these countries eat really badly, and so sugar and or carbs are part of their regular diet, which does not help their diabetes. Diabetes causes at least $966 billion in health expenditure. That's US, so that's going to be like $4 trillion Canadian. A 316% increase over the last 15 years. 1 in 7 adults, 51 million people, are living with diabetes in North America and the Caribbean. That's how they classify it. 1 in 4 adults living with diabetes are undiagnosed. Fun fact. That's 25% of our population may have diabetes, doesn't know about it. Diabetes was the 7th leading cause of death in the U.S. in 2022. Now, here's why I'm telling you this. Back when I turned 50, my doctor told me I'm a diabetic. That was like the worst piece of information I could have ever gotten. And I got to tell you something. I went through a period of depression because I felt like my body had finally was betraying me. And I just felt like life was over, right? Like I'm a diabetic now, pump me on insulin, I'm going to lose my eyesight, my life is over. So I come home from my doctor's appointment, and just so you know, as a man, I would rather crawl into the forest and die than know what's wrong with me. I would just rather I don't need to know. That's fine. Yeah, okay, I'll die. That's fine. I don't want to go to the doctor. Right? I just don't want to go to the doctor. And for a man who's over a certain age, there's reasons why we don't, but that's a whole different conversation. This is healthcare, people. When I was 50, I was told I was diabetic, and I would really, really, really felt, A, that my life was over, and B, I kind of felt a little angry with God as well, too. Like, right? I come home, and lucky for me, I live with a very tenacious redhead. And she said, so what did the doctor say? He says, I'm a type 2 diabetic. And he goes, and then, and this is, by the way, this is during the pandemic, right? So I had these Zoom calls with these diabetic educators. And this one doctor, I was doing a Zoom call with her. She's like, yeah, so here's what's going to happen. You're a type 2 diabetic. I saw your results. We're going to get you on metformin. We're going to get you on the medication. And we're going to start going towards this path. I'm like, okay, this is what I got to do. I got to go on medication. This sucks, but okay, fair enough. So I told my wife. She's like, no, you're not doing that. I'm like, I knew she wanted to kill me. I knew this. Okay, I knew this. Maybe it was when I was sleeping and there's a pillow over my head with her holding it. Maybe that was my first, no. She says, you're not doing that. I'm like, why? She goes, you can change this. I'm like, no, they told me I'm a diabetic. I can't change this. She goes, okay, just do some research, honey. You do some research on the Bible. Try doing some research on this. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll do some research. Fine. I'm like a 2-year-old sometimes. Fine. Right? Clean your room. Fine. Right? So I did some research. And the research I realized is that type 2 diabetes can actually be reversed. It's not that I will never be a diabetic again. It just means that if I change certain things in my life, I won't have to go on medication. So, of course, Donna, tell me what I need to do. What do I need to do? And she's like, so, it's funny. My wife and Donna are kind of good cop, bad cop. My wife is bad cop in the sense of like, listen, you can do this, kind of whatever. And Donna's like, okay, let's talk about this. All right, let's see how we can do this. Right? She's very uncomfortable. I'm referencing her, but I want to be honest with you about this. So I said, okay, what do I need to do? So I started researching what causes blood sugar spike. Bread. Oh, bread. I'm Indian. I love bread. Rice. Basmati rice. I can't have that anymore. I love rice. And of course, sugar. Just so you know, my favorite cake is Black Forest cake. I love me Black Forest cake. Since I was a kid, I've always loved Black Forest cake because it's the most sugary pie, sugar, candy, chocolate. It's my jam. So when I say to you that these are things I have to give up, it was kind of like, okay, fine. But I was afraid. I was afraid of dying. I was afraid of not just dying, but also devolving. I was afraid of what the repercussions if I didn't check this. Second thing, I had to find a way to know whether I was actually changing this or not. So there's something I do every morning is I prick my finger and I test my blood every morning. Well, okay, not every morning now. It's every couple of mornings. But basically, I test my blood every morning, and I have this little monitor, and I put my little blood swab onto that, and it tells me my sugar content, what's called my blood fasting levels. And my blood fasting levels, I've known, have to be under 7. Under 6.5 is even better. And right now, just in case you're wondering, my blood fasting level is between 6.2 and 6.3. For a type 2 diabetic, that's fantastic. It means I don't have to go on medication yet. My new doctor, I call him Dr. Killjoy. It's not his name, but that's what I call him. He said to me last time, because my one doctor retired and transferred me over to the new doctor. And my first time with this new doctor, I was all excited because like, hey, yeah, I'm diabetic, but I'm able to kind of manage it with diet and exercise. He's like, yeah, but it's debilitating and eventually you're going to have to. I'm like, really, dude? You should write greeting Hallmark cards and all that. So anyways, actually I kind of got angry and I really buckled down on my diet and even got even harder and just to prove Dr. Killjoy wrong. Anyways, I know this is like, you're like, where's this going? I thought this is a spiritual transformation. I wasn't sure if I was succeeding as a diabetic until I could externally test to see whether I was succeeding. And that was something that I didn't realize when it comes to transformation. I had to first have this fear, and I still have this fear, that if I eat improperly for an extended period of time, if I don't do what I'm supposed to do as far as diet and exercise, I'll have to go on insulin, I'll have to go on metformin, I'll have to go on these drugs, and I'll be on those in my life. Second, I have to have some external way of not just feeling. Because what the truth is you can feel like you've eaten properly for the day, but that little monitor tells me the truth of the lie of that. So when I was putting this series together, I was thinking to myself, when I wrote that formula together, I realized something. Diabetes is very much like our spiritual transformation. It's kind of abstract. I can go through life thinking, you know what, I'm doing pretty good. I might be doing pretty good. Why are my hands tingling? Right? Like I feel like I'm doing pretty good as a diabetic. I can feel like I'm no longer a diabetic. But the truth is, until I test my blood, until I go through my 3-month checkup for my all the other things I had to go through, I'm actually not sure if it's true or not. And that's what I realized when it comes to transformation that we don't have as Christians. Is we don't have A, external, and B, we don't have this idea of testing whether we've actually grown or developed. And the problem with that is we leave ourselves in this abstract world of like, transformation, yeah, but we don't actually know. We have no data to actually support the claim whether we're growing or not growing, and that's where I want the series to go. So as I go through the series, I'm not just going to say to you, well, I want you to pray more. I want you to love God more. Because that's easy, and also I think that's also self-defeating. One of the reasons why I think qualified to talk to you about this is because before I got transferred to Dr. Killjoy, my previous doctor, he said to me something very interesting. The reason I got transferred was because he was retiring. And he said to me after my last blood work and my last, all the workup, he's looking at the results, and he said to me, just so you know, I've been practicing medicine for, I think he said like 35 years, something like that. And he says, in those 35 years, only 2 people have ever reversed their diabetes. He says, you and somebody else. I said, well, how many diabetes? He's like, oh, thousands upon thousands. I say, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, when people are told they're a diabetic, a type 2 diabetic, they automatically just go on medication. And that's fine. And some people have to. Absolutely. Please, let me just be very clear about this. I'm not an anti-medication person. But with type 2 diabetic, you actually can manage it if you do the proper things. Now, there may come a time, according to Dr. Killjoy, that I'm not going to be able to. But until that day comes, I'm still going to work on it. So he said to me, he goes, when most people are given the diagnosis you're giving the diagnosis of, they just basically go on the medication. And as soon as you start the medication, it's not like it's a downward spiral, but it's just kind of like you are now on it forever. And then it increases, it's all that kind of stuff. When I thought about my own personal transformation, and the reason why people come to me in regards to, so actually it's a funny story. In my one job, I've only been there now for like 8 months or something like that, but at least a dozen people have come to me in regards to health issues. And again, I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV, but when I kind of talk a little bit about my journey, so my head manager, pre-diabetic. What do I need to do? All right, let's talk about your sugar content. Let's talk about your bread content. And whenever she's eating lunch in the back room, and I see what she's eating, she's always like, "No, it's salad. It's okay. It's protein. It's okay." I'm like, "Okay." One time she had bread, and I said, "Okay, all right. I'm gonna let this one go." But right. So the reason I feel qualified to talk to you about transformation is in my transformation. Many of you who might know me, I've lost about 32 pounds in the last couple of years. And I just actually did my blood, on Monday. I went for an echocardiogram. They did my blood pressure. I'm 112/76. 112/76, just so you know, is excellent as far as blood pressure. Donna, right? Yeah, okay. And the technician said, yeah, that's a blood pressure of like a 35-year-old or something like that. I think she was just being nice. But it's pretty good, right? I'm not 35, it's true. Remember, brown don't frown. We're good. It's good genetics. I want you to know something. As we talk about this idea of spiritual transformation, there are real ways that we can actually find out if we're transforming or not. And I know I'm being funny, and I know I'm going through my own little journey of this, but I really believe if we really think about spiritual transformation, if we apply some of the principles I want to talk about, I guarantee you will change. Now, there's an aspect of this I haven't talked about, and I'm not going to talk about yet, but there's an aspect that the Holy Spirit has to come into it, and we're going to get to that. Because the Holy Spirit, He is the engine of transformation, but it's a partnership, not a puppetry type of thing, like Holy Spirit takes over and you just become a different person. It's a partnership, and we'll talk about that. But I want, more than anything, for us to stop living in this nebulous, abstract world of spiritual transformation and start actually breaking it down, saying, hey, this is what a spiritually transformed Christ follower looks like. I want to give you absolute goals, and we're going to do a spiritual inventory on a Sunday. You're literally with a piece of paper and a pencil. We're going to map out how spiritually mature you are. And we're going to break it down to a percentage. You don't have to share it. You're not going to share it. I don't want to know it. But I need you to see something here, that God is not satisfied to leave you as you are. When I look through the scriptures, when I look through the Bible, when I think about my own spiritual life, God is constantly always ahead of me, like, come on, come on, come on. And I'm the one going, well, like, I'm really kind of watching the 7th season of Big Bang Theory, so maybe if I could just, if you could just give me a second here or something. The Holy Spirit, the triune God, is always looking, he's always ahead of us. He's always like, no, we can do this. We can do this. And it's always me that's fighting. It's always me that's like self-deceiving myself. It's like, well, I'm a pastor. I don't need to grow spiritually anymore. I've arrived. I know. It's like, no. We always have to go forward. Let me close. We already saw this passage of scripture, but I really like it, and it's going to be kind of our thesis statement for our series. Dear friends, you always followed my instructions when I was with you, and now that I'm away, it is even more important. Work hard to show the results of your salvation. Pause. When you became a Christ follower, did anybody ever tell you that you'd have to work hard to be a Christ follower? They just said to you, most likely, say the sinner's prayer, and now you're a Christian. No one's ever said to you, probably, you got to work hard to be a Christian. Right? You have to work hard to be a Christian. And not only that, work hard and external. Not just work hard and feel like a Christ follower. Not just work hard and feel like you love Jesus. Work hard and show results of your salvation. That's where transformation really comes, showing results of our salvation. Most Christians can't show results of their salvation because they're not working hard. And then they wonder why they're not being transformed. Obeying God with deep reverence and fear. There it is again. For God is working in you, and we're going to talk about this, giving you the desire and the power. These two together, when we unpack this, you'll see what God has planned for you, and you'll see whether you're partnering or resisting what this power, this desire is, to do what pleases Him. One of the things that's interesting about UCC is that I'm crazy when it comes to when I preach to you guys. I'm always aware of something in my heart, is that I know that people who come to UCC have either been a Christian for many, many years, have heard all these different kinds of sermons, and I know I talk a lot, I know I talk long, and I know I talk fast. But what I also know too is that being a Christ follower is getting more and more difficult in the world. It's not like, oh yeah, it's easy. We are getting inundated more and more with the cultural values, cultural methodology, and we as Christ followers, we have to have a better sense of discernment, a better sense of like, how do we move from here? I think it's getting harder to be a Christian, not easier. And I kind of want to meet that difficulty with my teaching, if I can. And I know sometimes I kind of go into like, psychology or science and all that, but again, all truth is God's truth in my opinion. So I'm going to bring all of that together, and I believe that through this series, if we apply it properly, not with guilt and shame, but with joy and fear and testing, I believe that we will all be transformed by the end of the series, and will at least give us a trajectory for healthy transformation. And we'll talk a little bit more what biblical transformation looks like as opposed to cultural transformation, because they're very, very different. And okay, no shocker here. Jewish understanding of transformation is very different than the Western understanding of transformation. Yeah, I know, right? The Jewish part, that's always comes into it. But it's true, though. The series is going to kind of push us, test us, and quantify whether we are changing or not, but that's the point. I don't have a test to test your blood to see how much Jesus blood you have and how much you blood you have. But if I could, that'd be fantastic. But I will test. I will ask you some difficult questions. But those questions are more towards moving you towards Christ-likeness and not the abstract, I want to be more like Jesus. Because when people say that, they forget this guy ended up on the cross. We say we want to be like Jesus, and that means like, oh, it's comfortable. No, no. To be like Jesus means to be in a constant state of discomfort. And that's where change happens. Let's pray. Heads bowed, eyes closed. We do this for an opportunity just for reflection, and I do want you to reflect. And the question I want you to reflect upon is, are you being transformed? Are you living in the discomfort of change? The Holy Spirit, He exists to change us, to move us. He is not okay with stagnation. He is not okay with lethargy or apathy or any other terminology. And He wants to grow us, change us, mold us. So as we embark upon this grand adventure, ask yourself if you are being transformed, if you are in movement, if you are in growth. And then ask yourself, how would you know? Dear Lord Jesus, I thank you that when you came to this earth, you modeled for us, you showed us, not in abstract, but in absolute practical detail, what a transformed Christ follower looks like. God, the church today has really forgotten that discipleship transformation is key, is at the very heart of our faith. Holy Spirit, I ask, I plead with you in Jesus' name that you would speak to all of us. You would transform all of us. You would convict, challenge, comfort, whatever it might be, whatever the lever is to move us out of our apathy into growth. Lord, I pray you would do so. And I pray throughout this series, Lord, that we'd get the tools to be able to quantify, to be able to see, to be able to experiment, to be able to know what transformation looks like. God, I thank you. You are the God of all things. You are the creative creator who uses multiple ways to get us to where you need us to be. I pray, Holy Spirit, that you would whisper or shout, you would move, you would awaken us, fan into flame, once again, the passion and desire we have to become more like you. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please stand as we sing our close.